Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in the world you are following this live stream right now. Welcome to the academic part of the European Slam Poetry Championship 2021. We are hosting two panel discussions today on two key themes of the World Poetry Slam Organization statements, decolonization and LGBTQI+. My name is Esohe Weyden and I will be moderating these panel discussions today and would like to start with the topic of decolonization. An interesting and enlightening discussion on decolonization requires competent panelists, and of course, we provided them for you. So maybe let's start at the beginning and let's get to know these people at first. So would everyone like to introduce themselves very briefly, very shortly, so we all know who you are? So maybe start with Yousra? Yeah.
Hi, so my name is Yousra Benfquih. What can I say? I have a background in human rights law. I defended my PhD in 2020, but apart from that academic hat, if you will, or leg, or part of dimension of myself, I have an important artistic leg, which manifests itself mostly through writing, poetry, essays, columns, prose, and in the poetic field, I'm mostly what they call a spoken word poet, a slam poet, or a poet who exists in the oral sound, because those definitions are also quite murky. And I think that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, yes, I'm Esohe Weyden. I have no scientific or academic background around decolonization. I have School of Life. And what I do is spoken word writing and a lot of thinking and talking and trying to bring people together. That's kind of what I try to do.
Okay, yeah? Nice. Okay. Thanks. I'm looking at you now, Siphindile.
Afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Siphindile Hhlongwa. I am from the Center for Creative Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I am a curator for the Poetry Africa Festival, which is a 25-year-old festival that is produced by the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Yeah, I'm just a curator. I sit on this panel as a curator, not as an academic, even though I do have linkages with the university, but I sit here as a curator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we are going to talk about decolonization today, but sometimes it's very good to define certain words at first, even if they are very difficult to define, definitely for the people at home, so that they can understand what we are talking about a little bit better. So I suggest I do the tour again and ask you guys, what does decolonization mean to you, or mean in general? How would you define this word? Somebody who would like to start? No fighting?
No, the issue of defining is always, I think, tricky, because by definition you leave things in and out, and I think decolonization is very much still, because it is so topical, I think it's difficult, but all the more important to get things right. Like, what are we talking about? I think for me, in a more, in an intuitive way, I would say decolonization is about how we both become aware of and then erase the traces of our colonial pasts in our institutions, in our societies, but perhaps first and foremost in our minds. I think that for me would be what decolonization is. That also opens it up to broader topics than to what it is today often confined to. For instance, I see a lot in the debates on decolonization a very necessary focus on anti-black racism, which is very necessary, but there's other things that are left out. For instance, we cannot understand Islamophobia today without a decolonial lens and without understanding Orientalism and how that ties into our decolonization. So I think, yeah, it's becoming aware of, and at the same time with the goal of erasing the traces of our colonial past in institutions, body and mind. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Someone else who would like to add something to this?
I think I'll go now. Yeah, I think it's a process on its own, decolonizing. It's not something that can be done over. We cannot rectify problems that started by colonialization over one night or one day. So it's a process itself that we need to engage on as human beings to actually break down those colonial structures that were built to actually put people on a disadvantage while others are actually prospering in their field. So it is a process itself, and I believe what we are doing right now, it's part of the process itself to get out of the colonial space to a space where we can all think freely, we can all contribute to a better society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so cool.
For me, to me, decolonialism is a verb. It's like you say, it's a process. It's waking up every day and reclaiming what you think is important, and to be aware of your power, to be aware of your constructions, yourself, and to daily, at the moment, at every action, actually, of every word and how you speak, to unlearn, to learn things, to reclaim it, and it goes further for me than if we say decolonial. We tend to look at colonialism because it's one of the dirtiest things that humanity came up with. But it goes, for me, it goes beyond that. Like, decolonization is also about the structure between man and women, which is older than colonialism itself. But also the structure of, let's say, sedentary versus people who are not sedentary, those with power against those who do not have power, which is even a structure that came before even the whole clash between man and woman. And also just as a human being to realize that we are very people-centric. We are focused on humanity, people, right? Everything is from the whole world is looked at from the point of a human being. What do things mean to us? And like that is something that has to be decolonized as well. How we treat our environment, from a stone to a chair to a cat to an animal. How do we conduct ourselves in this world reflects to who we are and what we want in this world. And I think it's a line that has to be, you can't just say it begins or ends at colonialism. No, we focus very hard on that, and we focus very hard on man, woman, and gender. Because I say man, woman, which already is something I need to decolonize. There is more than man and woman, you know? It's something you define yourself, you daily, you wake up and you redefine and you reclaim. Like love, you reclaim that love, and if you do that daily, it gets stronger, or you can rebuild things. So that to me is decolonization.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Let's continue.
I was getting worried.
Could you hear me or not?
No, I did not hear you, and I was getting worried. But now I can hear you.
Again, well, what I said was that what we heard were a lot of verbs, actually, and there was one noun, a process, which actually also feels like a hidden verb somehow, because a process is also something that you need to do. You need to take active steps to get from a certain point to another point. So I think it's very interesting what you guys already brought up, and we only just started, so I think that's a very good sign. Well, everybody here in this panel has different roles, you could say. We are all busy in the artistic field. Some of you are also affiliated or were affiliated with the academic world and know how the academic world works and how how it works and functions. So the interesting thing today, or the topic that we're going to talk about, is we're going to try to bring these two things together. We're going to talk about the academic field, but we're also going to talk about slam poetry, the industry as an artist, and link those two worlds or fields to the topic of decolonization. So I'm going to start with Yousra here on my right. So you're a PhD in human rights law at the University in Antwerp, but you're also a writer, a poet. In which role do you think that you can make the biggest change in terms of decolonization?
I think that's a very difficult question. I think for Siphindile it will be equally difficult because I think in many ways they are different, but also they are connected. But if I have to choose in a way, I can only speak for myself, and I have currently chosen to leave academia and to focus on my writing. I think that is an answer maybe already in and of its own. But the reason why I did so was not per se because I have an aversion for academia, or I grew an aversion during those PhD years, which happens, by the way. People think twice before you embark upon such a journey, but because I see problematic dynamics within the institution of academia. There's a very neoliberal logic of everything has to be quantified, the publish or perish thing is very, very real. A lot of people are falling out in burnouts and whatnot, and the focus is not, for me at least, not on what science should be, which is slow and about curiosity and taking time, but it is very much about quantified output. We are a machine, and the university, I think, has to be very careful because I think more and more it's evolving into a company and not an academic institution. And that is, I see Siphindile nodding, so I'll be very curious to hear her experiences. And that is for me the biggest reason why I decided to leave academia, because I don't feel like I have the freedom that a scientist should get, really. And currently, I feel more freedom in that regard in my artistic practice. But I have to, of course, nuance that as well, because that is a very precarious situation financially. So I'm taking a big risk now. Stepping out of a fixed financial system where you have your monthly salary and whatnot. So it's also, I want to not take part in the romantic idea of if you want to write, just focus on your writing, which I hear a lot, right? A lot of people have been saying that for years to me. If you want to write, you just stop everything and write. And first thing I always say is, yeah, you're speaking from a privileged position because that there are other needs in our lives that have to be met socially, economically, and so on. But I think, in a nutshell, for me currently, I feel more freedom to go against the system in my artistic capacity. I think you can have that freedom as an academic as well, but you have to be lucky with how progressive your institution is, and some people are right to question if that is possible at all within universities today, if they are not per definition colonial institutes. But I leave that question open.
Okay, interesting. Siphindile, I'm looking at you right now because actually I can ask you the same question. In which role do you think you can have the most impact in the decolonization process?
I'll first speak to what Yousra had said in terms of the institutions that we are working for. I think what we have done also at the center is to try and actually provide some critical materials like writing of the festivals that we do. This is including the Poetry Africa Festival and other 6 festivals that we run. So we provide that academic critical writing for all the festivals that we do, so that what we are doing, we are also generating learning materials for that feeds to the output of the university, the learning and teaching and learning, output of the university. So it's quite an interesting one, and I think you would have a difficulty because you are coming into an academic space where you are coming in as a person who, like, I curate festivals. So the one way we can do that is to teach them. That's why we have embarked on a journey of producing journals for each festival that we do, so that we are contributing to the teaching and learning component of the university, because it's very important that they understand. Firstly, when you come to them and you say you're talking about poetry, you're talking about slam specifically, it's something that they would not understand or grasp. But as much as we can cheat and play on the same field with them, with producing all this academic papers with all our festivals, it actually bridges the gap between the academia and the professional world.
Okay, thank you for giving this example, also how to bring those two worlds together. Very nice.
Yeah.
Sekou, you are not affiliated to a university or a college, but you have the School of Life, and you're of course a very great artist, writer, poet, rapper. You're also the city poet of Antwerp right now. How do you define your role in this decolonization process? And if you want, you can still say something about the role in academic fields as well.
Yeah, because I got a little bit confused with the question. I went to academia, and I think if you take a college or a university, it's an institute and it functions like an institute, just like an poet laureacy, stadsdichterschap, functions as an institute. So it's the same. It's about power. When I look, because I don't have a higher degree, so I'm speaking from there. I speak of what I see. But in my opinion, it works top down. You go to someone who tells you what is their truth, and in that sense, it is per definition colonial. Like I have the knowledge that you should learn. And I'm not saying that it can't be useful, but it's dangerous, especially if you, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but in Belgium, the institutes are white, and the boards are white, and the teachers are white. So the whole point of view is white, coming from a white perspective, a Eurocentric perspective. So per definition, it's a colonial Eurocentric perspective. And you can be talking about anything. You can talk about space, and it will still be a white Eurocentric perspective on things. So I think my role could be to be aware of this, to be aware of what my powers are, and to always try to spread it out, to make sure that I am not the sole decision maker, that I am not the sole person working on this. There is power, there is platform, it's our platform, it's our power, which is sometimes quite a hard thing to do. You would say like, oh, here's power, people will want it. No, because this power also has to come with money. It's an economical thing, right? Because you can work on decolonization, people work on this their entire lives, but if they, like you say, if they are not economically, if their needs are not economically met, it's always going to be a struggle. It is a struggle already by itself, but that means that next to doing that, like because there's decolonizing for yourself, and then there's decolonizing into the world, and just showing proof, like, look, I believe this is important, let's talk about this. But next to that, if you have to go 9 to 5 work or do something that isn't decolonial, because people are not creating platform for this, because they are not finding it important enough, urgent enough to actually invest money in it, or they put it with people who have no expertise in this, like diversity consultants here who are all white and have a full-time job working on this. They don't feel the urgency, and then you get people who burn out completely, who like really fight. As you say, you're fighting. This shouldn't be a fight. We can't be fighting this whole time. We need to cooperate. We need to, like you say, find decolonial spaces in where we find ourselves protected and safe, and where we can think and get together. I don't believe, not to me, a university or an institute. I have not met, I believe, a big institute in Flanders or Belgium that has managed to create a safe space in that sense, or showed any urgency to make a change in that.
Okay.
Sadly.
Somebody wants to add something?
I would like to add something. I
Yeah,
agree with my fellow panel member here. It's very important who is behind the decolonization. For instance, we are in KZN, which is mostly Black dominated. So for us, it makes sense because the Black consciousness movement is there, working together in decolonizing. How can you expect, especially a white person, to decolonize while they were colonizers of the African continent? So it's very important for us to face those realities and say, we cannot expect a white person to push a Black person's agenda. At the end of the day, we need to be freed from these colonial chains. So it's really important for us to create a safe space. And that's what we have done, and what we have achieved with the Poetry Africa is to create that safe place for freedom of expression, for artists to come in on our stage where they feel safe, they can speak their mind, you know. So I think it's important for us to actually look at who's behind the decolonization process itself.
Well, maybe we can, because I like what you just said, make the link to the poetry industry, because we're all actually in this poetry industry, we're all poets, writers. Do you guys think that the poetry industry still needs to decolonize itself? And maybe specifically slam poetry? Because if we look at slam poetry, most people always think of a very progressive and diverse literary genre in comparison to like written poetry, at least here in Belgium. Do you think there's still a lot of work in terms of decolonization, or do you think that we are actually doing quite good in our slam poetry fields? And Siphindile, you can also answer the question. Like I just asked the question like from a viewpoint in Belgium, but I'm very interested also to hear how it is in South Africa. So, who wants to start? Yeah, Yousra.
I don't mind, yeah. I think that question to me, I think of two fields. If you ask me, does poetry need to be decolonized? I would say the established, canonized canon poetry, the poetry of the white masters, if you will, yes, it has to be decolonized. There's some small movements happening right now, the questioning of the canon, and so on. So I think that is without a doubt. Yes, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, that goes back indeed to what we teach at schools and so on, who we deem as important and who is erased from the literary history. As for spoken word or slam poetry, I have so many thoughts on that. I will try to keep them concise. Because I think in essence, when you go back, for instance, to how spoken word, I think Sekou can definitely also attest to that, originated in the Harlem Renaissance and was very much tied to the Afro-American movement. I think it is decolonial by definition in how it was sparked from the start as a very anti-hegemonic critical genre. But by definition. However, we see now with the big popularity of spoken word and slam poetry, everyone is today a slam poet, but especially white institutions are also picking up on a phenomenon. It is cool, it is catchy, we need someone for an event. Can we ask you as a spoken word artist or a slam poet? I think there we have to be careful, because again we see what often happens, which is appropriation. So I see a lot of appropriation by institutions of what is really a genre which was developed by people of color. I'm not only speaking about Harlem Renaissance in the US, but even, I mean, my roots are Moroccan. When I trace back my heritage, it was also one of oral storytelling. We are oral storytellers, our ancestors. And so I have, when I see how trendy spoken word is today, I always try to be a bit careful. Like, do you know where it originates? Do you know what it stands for? It's not just about taking the mic and, you know, speaking your mind. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but it is also more than that. It is by definition a critical decolonial genre, and I don't always see that today, and that is concerning to me. Yeah.
Okay, someone who wants to add something? Sekou Siphindile?
Siphindile, please start if you want to. Yeah, we want to
Why
hear
am
South
I
Africa
given the
speak.
floor? I think also the movement itself within the South Africa as well has grown so much in the last couple of years. What I like is that they respond immediately to social issues. Slam poetry is not about getting up a competition itself, but it's also about the content of work that slammers produce. You know, it's so immediate, it responds quickly to the social ills that we are facing. It gets us to think where we are as humanity and where we're actually going. So spaces like this are for the nation itself to reflect and also think what it is that they want to do differently from what has been done in the previous time. So it's very important for slammers to exist. It's very important for the genre to exist itself, you know, to assist maybe academia or what, because there's quite a lot of slammers that are growing, that I'm seeing within the South African space as well, that have been doing very well, of which they've got, they've coming up with material, decolonized material, if I may say. So it's one of those things when you have, especially speaking from a university perspective, that we need to bridge this gap. We need to bridge this gap as the academia and the professional as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Sekou.
Your question was, is it on? Is this on? Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question was, does it need to decolonize, right?
Yeah, so the poetry industry, or more specifically slam poetry. So like Yousra also did, like she gave answers to both, but you can also just answer one of the two.
Yeah, I believe that decolonization is a daily process. So yes, especially I'm a man, I need to decolonize myself on a daily basis. But we all need to decolonize ourselves on a daily basis. But having said that, the more power you have, the more the urgency should be there to decolonize yourself, and the less they do it, because this is how power is created, by excluding people. So I believe that yes, I believe that in first essence, I don't believe slam poetry has to do anything except for be and speak and express. But you do feel when people do slam poetry or poetry in general, or just speak, storytell, when they express themselves, you feel from where they come, what are their values and what do they find important, what are they speaking of and how do they speak of these things, where do they speak of these things. And there you feel that a lot of things still need to be decolonized. We need to keep doing this. It's not going to end. From the moment this process ends, it's like love. From the moment you stop declaring your love, you've lost it. You need to declare it every day again, and this is what gives strength. But having said that, I would look at the institutions first, because they have the power and they have that money. And they are, as you say, window dressing a lot. Like, if your whole board is white, if your whole subsidy money, all the money you get goes 99%, like, it's not representative. Like, if it just goes to the same people over and over again, and it becomes this homogenic mass who just reproduces the same results, then it's very hard and difficult to, like, then you can hold an event on decolonization, but it's apparent that structurally, money-wise, power-wise, that's where these things need to happen. And I don't see this happening in institutions. I don't see it happening in universities, in poetry organizations, like institutes. I'm saying from the moment you get money from the government, you already kind of are claimed, you're already appropriated by the government or something, you know? And to say spoken word, it's as old as humanity. Like my father was from Mali. And the whole of Mali is built on spoken word. Like the whole creation of the empire was oral. So without spoken word, the Mali empire would not exist, at least not in the way that we know it. But at the same time, it's also colonial, because all these writers were writing about the empire between these lines and this culture and this identity. So the question is, where does, you know, you have an ego. We all have ego. We have a country. It has an identity, the ego of the country. Where do these lines fade? What do you stand up for? What is important? I do not care about lines. I do not care about countries. I think they are colonial by itself. There's blood. We are talking blood. We are talking pain. So I'm not nationalist in this sense, but I do feel very strongly for the identity of the Dogon and for the identity of Burkina Faso and all the different ethnical groups and everybody who has their way of thinking and values, and I need to learn from that. So it's a very difficult one to, there is no human being without ego, but too much ego will take over a human being. So where is the line? It's something you daily, depending on the situation, you have to think about. So yes, we all need to decolonize, but the institutions need to really make work of this fast. Yes.
Someone wants to add something to that?
Yeah, let's decolonize the educational system itself.
Ah, the educational system, okay.
It needs to be decolonized in a way. Not even in a way, we have to get it decolonized because it doesn't speak to the people or the community or the culture at hand. So we are all teaching what has been taught donkey years back, but it's irrelevant to the current states of each community. So the education system needs to be decolonized so that it's accessible to all.
Yousra, I see you nodding, and you also wanted to add something,
Yeah,
so go for it.
But maybe I'm not sure if we're deviating from what you wanted to
No,
ask.
no problem. You can go all the way, like to
I'm
the left,
also
to
not
the
sure
right.
if my mic is on.
I
I don't hear myself, but as long as people at home hear me, it's all good.
Okay.
No, two things maybe in a way they connect. What Siphindile says about the education system, I think for sure that is one of the key areas where decolonization has to take place, because at the very heart of the matter always of systems of domination and colonization lies narrative. You cannot colonize people if you don't first make them believe something about themselves, that they are inferior. And I think we focus a lot on colonial structures, but we forget that behind every system of power lies narrative, discourse, story, what you make people believe about themselves. And in many ways, stories that we have come to internalize. I speak for myself, I have internalized a whole lot of racist thoughts about me and my people and what so on. And I think so therefore, when we speak about whiteboards, it's even more about that. I know there's people of color who have internalized so much of capitalist and racist ideas that it doesn't really matter if you would swap them in that board, for instance. So I think definitely educational systems where we teach and in whose hands is knowledge production? Who defines what knowledge is and what is valuable knowledge and what is culture or folklore or interesting exotic stuff, but not really knowledge, right? Which I can talk hours and hours about because I have experienced a lot of that during my PhD, especially as a woman of color. Navigating white academia has been a very, very, very difficult position. But also on what Sekou said, coming back to what he said in the beginning of reclaiming, unlearning and learning. I think poetry by definition, not even spoken word poetry, spoken word definitely, but even poetry at its very basic foundational practice is disruptive. Poetry is the literary genre by definition where you disrupt things, where you don't take things at first glance, where you disrupt the categories which we are given in society. So I think a poet definitely has that capacity of decolonial thinking by definition, because he works with the decolonial matter, seeing things differently. That is what a poet does, or trying to give different perspective on what is usually seen in only one way. So I think that is connected to me. The big stories we are told to believe about ourselves in institutions, and the very small power that you can take back in your poetry by reclaiming what has tried to make you believe things about yourself that are very problematic and keep you in that inferior position. That's how systems work. As long as you believe that you're inferior, the system just stands.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like it how you added narrative, and Siphindile, how you added the educational system, because you can see things like this, panels, discussions like this. You have different insights, different viewpoints, but if you put them all together, you get like a full story, like full circle. So somebody else who wants to add something? Yeah, go for it.
No, what you said now, I think, is very important. The coming together of different perspectives, and I think that is also one of the power of spoken word poetry. I think classical canonized poetry, Eurocentric poetry, is classically seen as the poet who's alone under a tree and needs to retreat and go away, and the whole romantic idea, which I think is still true to a certain part, to a certain extent. But I think what is different about spoken word poetry and poetry of marginalized groups, maybe that, I think for me that's the best definition really. Poetry of marginalized groups is that it is always a gathering. If I look at Mama's open mic here in Flanders, right? I mean, you and Ellie basically pioneered the whole genre in Flanders, and it was... So Mama's Open Mic is a collective, for those who don't know it, which was, I think, it's over 10 years old now, which is a safe space where people come together and share their poetry, and you see that it is a gathering. And that it's not a coincidence. People come together because it's the only space in society where they can come together and speak freely in a safe way and express their very embodied poetry. And I think that is a very peculiar and specific dimension of spoken word poetry, that it is not only about you and your artistic self-expression. It is also that, but it is more than that. It is about the collective and how we come together as people and how we can reimagine things from there on.
Yeah.
Just want to add a little context. Ellie is pushing the Mama's Open Mic. She's the one pulling that and set it up. It's 10 years now. Me, I'm just one of the first slammers, or perhaps the first slam poet that kept slamming, because they said there were guys before you, or who are they? Show me. No, but I'm not affiliated to this university or to WPSO or to Creatief Schrijven. Actually, I'm not affiliated to any organization, institute, except at this point, probably Antwerpen Boekenstad, because of the poet laureacy, and it's a clash. It's always a clash. It's always a fight. Every institute, I clash with this university. I clash with Creatief Schrijven. I don't know who they are. I know who they are, but I don't know any of them, so I haven't clashed with them yet, I suppose. But it is a struggle in that sense. I just wanted to give that context. I think it's important to understand in welke hoedanigheid, in what position I speak. I speak for myself. I do not speak for other people or for other organizations. But I just wanted to grab this to say, Mama's Open Mic, it's Ellie. She figured out that instead of going top down, we work together. We all equal. You're faster, better, whatever. This is not the point. The point is that you tell your story and that we get together on that basis, which a cipher in hip hop does as well, which is something that is quite lost in classical poetry sometimes. It needs to have these certain forms, and I don't know enough of it, I suppose, to really speak out on that. But I do believe that just to level that, when you say education, we think of school, right? Mm-hmm. But that is not per se what education is. Education is the telling of stories, right? To learn from that, to pick things which you find important and to go further on that. From the moment somebody steps up and says, this is more important than that, that means you do not understand the ways of the universe. The small and the big are the same. The one does not exist without the other. There is no distinction. We do that. We need to do it to make ourselves important. I am alive, this is dead, right? I have a soul, you do not. I have this, you do not. Like, this is it's very people-centric. Like, us, everything starts from us. And obviously, because we're people, but to just understand that it doesn't have to be this way. This is not the functioning of the world. This is what we are giving to it. It gives new ideas. It opens up. It gives more perspective. That's the difference. It's exactly the opposite for me as what a university does. University zooms in very deep, and I think decolonization zooms out. If that makes any sense.
Siphindile, did you still want to add something?
No, I think from what Yousra had said, in terms of the poetry space, it creates that sense of community.
Yeah.
Where we are able to learn from each other. So it's not a traditional way of saying, here's the information and here's what it is. Also, it's important, like he said, from who's telling the story itself. The mere fact that I'm sitting here in South Africa, I should be there. But because South Africa has been banned from entering entering Europe, it depends on the media itself, how they tell their story, how they told the story of Africa. You know, that's another thing that needs to be looked at as an African person. How do we decolonize all this? First, we're colonized by the Europeans, and secondly, we are being banned from entering their countries because the media decides to tell the African story in their own narrative. They're not looking from our perspective. Like, it's not a narration of the African continent. It's a narration of a European person narrating the story of Africa. No one has ever said and asked Africa what it is that we feel and what it is, how we want to move forward. But all we are keep on seeing in the media, Europeans are busy making decisions on our behalf. So that's a thing on its own right now. It's really unfair. Like, who's telling the story and why are they telling the story? They can always twist the truth to get what they want. So I think it was a wake-up call saying, you know, Africa, you know, they pulling their strings on Africa.
Thank you. I'm going to another question so we can get to this one as well. Because nowadays, you see a lot of organizations who are trying to do like some first attempts to decolonize their organization by hiring a person of color, for example, in the organization or in the firm. You guys were talking about all white dominated spaces, organizations that are actually all white. Does it really help to include a few people of color in the organization? And at which point are we speaking of tokenism? And yeah, have you ever felt like a token yourself? Yes, I hear you say. Would you like to talk about it, or Sekou? Yeah, okay, go.
I'm thinking about this. This guy is called Killer Mike, and what he does in the States, he's like, you know, I just want to try and live all black for 3 days. So he just everything around him, what he ate, how he moved, what he does, he's like trying to figure out, are we included in this? And this guy slept on a bench. He couldn't get anywhere. And it's the same here if I look around, like this chair, who is it made by? These stones, who is it made by? The organization we are speaking in the name a little bit of, like the university we speak of, how many people of color? Like in powerful positions, how many?
None, I think.
None.
No? Okay.
0. How many people in University of Antwerp work here? On the payroll, people getting paid. I'm talking about power, right? I'm talking about
I have no idea.
payroll.
Do you
Hundreds?
know Yousra?
Hundreds?
or more or less?
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 Less? People working for the university?
I have no idea. Yeah.
Less than 100? Oh, seriously? No. How many
no,
people in the university?
yeah.
How many people work in the university? Out of the hundreds, 0. You want to take away PSO? I don't know. Creatief schrijven? I also know. 0. You know, if you go into politics, the answer is probably a few, and then you look at the position they're in, and you're like, yeah, there's no position of power. It's like there's I know Ministry of Culture, for instance, in Brussels. That's 500 people and 6 people of color work there. 5 of them do cleaning and are drivers. There's one I know who is not exactly in a position, but he does have a position. That's one position of power of a person of color in 500. If you take our media channel, which is 2,500 people who work there, there's not 10 people of color who work there. And then you can say, like, okay, it could be tokenism to just put a person of color there, but it is a start. It means that they've thought about it, at least. Like what they do in the States, they do some window dressing, but there at least is someone and there is some representation. And if you don't even have that, and you really start asking questions, how far do we still have to go? How, like, if not even that, if there's not even tokenism, then where do we stand?
I would be curious, what Siphindile thinks. Would you want to go first? In reaction to Seko, maybe?
Seko, I like your approach in terms of the university environment itself. How many people are actually sitting in leadership positions? There are very few. But I gotta commend the university that I'm currently working on. They are really pushing. You know, we are within the province that predominantly speak isiZulu, which is an indigenous language. Which is a prescribed course for all new students to actually learn isiZulu, so that and also being taught in their mother tongue, because it's quite a challenge. Even when it comes to registration, you'll find that you get your assistant that actually speaks in your mother tongue. That gives comfort and gives access to a student who's coming into the university to be able to communicate in his or her mother tongue. That's what the university is all about, is decolonizing and being able to create that access for all students and teachers to be able to engage freely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in that way, I spent a few months in South Africa for my PhD at NMU, Nelson Mandela University, and it's true that it's a very different experience. So I cannot speak for your situation, but in our case, it's definitely not yet at the stage where you're speaking from. But I wanted to just a little bit on that notion of, I'm not sure if I share the opinion that tokenism is a start, because for me, being a token person of color, you feel that. It's not that I can say it happens then and then and then. Mostly you feel it, and you can feel it in the sense that when an institution asks you or a person of color to make them look good, that is really the crucial difference with true inclusion, although inclusion also sometimes a problematic word, when it is not about them, but it is truly about the other that has been left out for so long. And usually that's intuition. You just feel it in how you are approached, what people ask, how they ask it. And so I could give examples, but I don't think that's per se interesting. I think the difference, between asking someone as a token or asking someone from a truly decolonial perspective boils down to exactly what Siphindile and Seko are saying is, are you ready to give up your power? Are you really sharing your power here? Or are you just wanting to keep up with the whole United Colors of Benetton movement? Are we all inclusive and look at our poster and whatnot, right? Which is something you see a lot today. You see a lot of white institutions know they cannot stay white anymore. So you see this catch up. They want to catch up on lost time, and you get this whole tokenist tendency because they're not really getting what it's about. It is not about power sharing, then you're tokenizing. Yeah.
I mean, there's always different levels, yeah? But when you speak of tokenism, for instance, when you take a person of color, or it could be, you know, we're talking about colonialism in the European sense, the racism that has been created in the 1500s, that colonialism, so let's talk from that context. And you take a person of color and you put them in a whiteboard, and this person just does exactly the same as the rest. Well, this person has a certain responsibility. They could be speaking out. And maybe they choose not to, and they get to be in positions where it becomes really hard and very difficult, and they can't speak out because they have been institutionalized. They earn their money from it. But at the same time, this person is confronted with it. Well, if we are doing bad, it's best to all of us be doing bad instead of just, now we have the pointing fingers. Let's put it together. Plus, this person eats. Their family, people of color, they eat, they will invest, they will do this. And we're all tokens. Let's just say we're sitting in a white institute talking about decolonization. We are tokens, yes? But I will not be censored, you see? But that's my choice. I could choose to be censored. I could choose to censor myself. But then it's up to the person. So I do believe that there's very lot of levels of tokenism, because in United Colors of Benetton you have the whole white thing, and then you just get like, oh, here's the picture, and hey, we're from all different walks of life. And you're like, no, okay, that's very deep tokenism, but they really go in a lot of levels. It's like racism, like colonization, it's like love. There's levels to this thing. Like it's a layered cake. It's like how racism works, like it's a layered cake. And I think it's in tokenism the same. But I rather have a board that is representative, even if their ideas are completely still Eurocentric and colonial and destructive in a sense. I'd rather have that than have a whole whiteboard, because then at least there is circulation, like economically, but also socially. People are confronted with this. And when you get enough mass, people will start be able to speak in the mouth. Oh, wait a minute, they said this and it did work for them. They didn't get chopped down, right? And then people will grow into it, or maybe not, but at least then we are all part of the problem or all part of the solution. And yeah, okay, there's a lot of work, and it's so hard to be the only person of color in a board. And what are you going to do? Like, oh, staatsdichterschap, oh, this poem and that poem, we won't have it, and we won't have this. And you come over here and they give you some crumbs, put you in a dossier, then pull you out again. How many times I had this? Like you name an organization, I can tell you, they've been doing it. But yeah, it starts.
Siphindile, before we get into this back and forth, you wanna chip in, or?
Yeah, I agree. Like, yes, it's important to have a person of color sitting in an influential position, but at the very same time, if that person is still institutionalized, it's very rare that the person will be able to stand for people of color and their rights. Mm-hmm. So you can be given a position just to hold the space and be muted. So that's another disadvantage of being in this, trying to make art for Black empowerment within an organization, just because predominantly it's been dominated by white people. So yeah, there is a danger in that. You can sit there as a Black person in a senior position, but be muted.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I also think you get this whole disproportionate burden on that one person or few handful of person of people of color who then have to fix the whole thing and have the emotional labor on top of their actual function, right? On top of their job, they get. I have been there for many years in academia, where there's so many extra burdens upon already the burden of a PhD, because I had to fix everything, and everything remotely connected to diversity issues. They came to me because you know something about this, right? Simply because I'm a person of color, right? So the whole reduction to your embodied identity. I do think what comes back all the time is we get stuck where we think like, okay, but there's a financial and a socioeconomic need, and it's better to have a few than none. I think that all ties into that you cannot speak about decoloniality or decolonialism without also speaking about anti-capitalism. I think as long as you put the decolonial debates outside of the framework of capitalism, you can't really come to any real progress, because you get stuck in these loopholes where we are like, it's better to have something than nothing, and the whole better a few crumbs than nothing. And I think that shows that it is literally impossible to do the one without the other. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys one last question, and then we're going to round this panel discussion up. So the day after tomorrow, so on the 10th of December, the final of the European the final of the European Slam Poetry Championship will take place. What do you guys expect from the organizations behind it and from the participating artists? Can be a very short answer as well.
Yeah, I expect them to decolonize themselves every day. No, to be busy on this. Tell your story, please, but be aware of what your impact is. Like we are not alone in this world. We are with people, yes. And there's moments that we have to take people into account. There's also moments that we don't. But when you're harming people, you're not doing right. But it is okay to bang on things that are harmful. Yes, and I do expect, but I think it's already there. You have freedom of speech up to the point it harms others.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I just thought it was a very interesting thing you touched there. Like you cannot, because we haven't, basically, we didn't do that. We only spoke on a social level on decolonization. But to say the capitalist structure we function in, to not add that to it is like we just took one small part, and that's where, yeah, next time. But it's a very important one, absolutely. It is a very extremely important to take that into account as well, yeah, because that is decolonization as well, the mercantilisme. This is how it all started in the 1500s as well, to have a country. I see you looking, there's less time I know, but I still want to finish this. Sorry. The countries and the racism, the oppression, they go hand in hand. So we cannot fight the oppression without actually fighting the structures that are in it, the economic structures, the whole money, the whole sucking empty of the global South. These go hand in hand. They are not accidents. They are very deliberate structures. So yes, in that sense, yes. That's where you get with the tokenism and the crumbs. Should you be happy with crumbs or build your own? No, we need to destroy the whole thing, basically, to rebuild it. But for that, you need an alternative. Yeah, we need alternatives, because if you destroy something, you need alternatives. But yeah, okay, just wanted to say that.
It's a very ambitious idea, but I think poetry is where you plant seeds of reimagining things that seem like they're unreimaginable, but maybe they are. I think it's a space for really deep rethinking. What I expect from the poets is that they, the whole cliche of having fun, first and foremost, yeah. I think what came back before, I think that's also important, because many times when you speak of spoken word, people are like, the contest, and I'm like, not really. That's something someone made out of it, and I think even it was a white man who made it into a contest format. But in essence, spoken word is about communion, about sharing, about connecting. So I think if you're up on that stage, try and bracket the fact that it's a contest and focus on that part of connecting. I think that will also make your performance better, actually.
Okay, that's a very good tip. And Siphindile, very short, because we're almost over time. What do you expect from the participating artists and the organizations behind it?
I'm expecting fun. Poetry should be enjoyable. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm also be looking at the content itself. I'm hoping that I'll get the translation as well of all the work up there, so that I can be able to connect, because that's very important. So I'm actually expecting fun. I'm expecting them to actually enjoy themselves, yeah, and be who they are without the fear of being judged.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you guys for sharing your interesting insights. I'm very sure the people at home who are following this panel discussion live right now, that they have learned a lot of new things. And I also hope that you guys will keep the conversation alive. So I'm looking at the camera now, I'm looking at the people at home. So don't just leave it here. Think about it this evening or another day this week. Talk about it with your friends.
Every evening for the rest of your life.
Every evening for the rest of your life. But just keep the conversation going. I think that's very important. So thank you, Siphindile, Yousra, and Sekou.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, soon I will be hosting another panel discussion about LGBTQA plus rights. So I hope you guys stay posted, because then we'll see each other later again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, dear audience. My name is Dagmara Świerkowska, and I am a PhD student at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, where I do research on poetry slam. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of the European Poetry Slam Championship. My speech today about poetry slams in Poland is very important to me. I'm glad that here I can talk about texts of Polish slammers who have been coming to slam for many years, and I know that in this group their artistic works would have a chance to be appreciated. The situation is completely different in Poland. Slam poetry does not arouse the interest of literary critics, and the statements of minorities, excluded people, and narratives created on the basis of their own experiences do not arouse interest. They are often ridiculed, treated as worthless and second-rate. The poetry slam is often reduced to an entertaining field of competition, while the facts of social engagement, the fact that we are dealing with one of the 5th manifestation of oral improvisation, and that these expressions can be therapeutic or can be a manifesto against exclusionary values, are ignored. In Poland, it's very difficult to raise funds to organize slam poetry events, which is why most organizers work on a voluntary basis, and artists voluntarily give up their prizes. When I applied for a place at the doctoral school of Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań 3 years ago, slam poetry was a completely unknown phenomenon to the academic community. In none of the Polish works on slam poetry has there been an attempt to analyze the speeches of specific artists. No one also has undertaken the task of defining the function of slam speeches. Was this a disadvantage for me? No. An unexplored subject is an opportunity for developmental research. I took it as a good coin and a chance to become an ambassador of the slam community in Poland, and as it turned out today, also worldwide. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today. My lecture will deal with the history of slam poetry in Poland and the poetics of rebellion that Polish slammers refer to their statements. Let's begin. Poetic slams have been taking place in Poland since 2003, and in the last 5 years one can observe an increase in their popularity, which is connected with slam events taking place regularly throughout Poland, as well as events of national rank. National Poetry Slam Championship in Poznań, and the Spoken Word Festival in Warsaw. It was also in these years that the first publication containing a slam live act was created. There was the album Łoskot, which featured recordings of text by Geyter, the winner of the first National Poetry Slam Championship, a Kraków-based slammer writing social text about the situation of women in Poland. Geyter, in her emotional utterance during slam poetry, often describes her own experiences, and her statements are a record of everyday life. Traveling by public transport, shopping, participation in entertainment and cultural events, or home living. For example, death of a beloved dog, partner relations. The life spaces described by the artist are familiar to the audience. The spectators of slam, who through the community of experience identify with the author and appreciate her work. Slammers performing on Polish stage tackle not only socially important topics, for example, hate speech, exclusion, immigration experience, multiculturalism, feminism, the situation of gender minorities, but also tend towards text commenting on events of global importance. For example, current disasters, scandals involving public figures, ecology, geopolitics, refugee situation. They also prepare statements of an entertaining nature. It is worth noting here that the above-mentioned topics are taken up with great frequency, but a feature of slammer text is the diversity in the range of issues raised at the slams. Sometimes poetry slams are improvised, and then the topic is often imposed by the audience, giving the chosen words to be used by the performer. Sometimes their absence from the text may cause disqualification of the slammer. There are also thematic tournaments, for example, organized in the Warsaw Klub Stół Powszechny or as part of the Poznań Festival Endemity, where, according to the rules of the event, authors should refer in their text to specific issues indicated by the organizers. For example, the problem of homelessness, constructing identity, climate, or women's rights. The possibility of presenting one's own vision of the world or reflection on everyday life, a rebellious manifesto or wistful observation of the surroundings, a verbal experiment or a performance using the uniqueness of the situation makes the slam events attract a variety of artists and recipients who together create a space that is difficult to define within a single field of art. The complexity of the phenomenon is further enhanced by the interactive communication situation, requiring the involvement of the slammer, who has 3 minutes to convince the audience of his or her original text, and who, by voting according to their taste and awareness, become responsible for the course of the event. The audience as a collective decides whose performance was the best and can also immediately react to the slammer's statement by interrupting the presentation or disrupting it. For example, when the texts coming from the stage are too vulgar, offensive, incompatible with the values professed by the audience in a given place, or even when the performer repeats his or her speech too often on different stages. A situation in which the audience has so many privileges and directly the broadcaster competing with other creators, limited not only by time but also by issues of subjective reception, creates a new relation between the creator and the audience. Mikael Smith, who organized the first slam poetry, emphasized that the oral character of slammer performances should be treated as a constitutive element. He also highlighted the rhetorical character and the potential of non-verbal means. Slam Papi also pointed out that an important background in the informal character of the event, as well as its opens to new, experimental forms. Attempts to write about slam in Poland so far have focused on 2 aspects that appear in Smith's definition: competition and the poetic nature of the performance. In 2004, Gazeta Wyborcza published a very emotional polemic between Igor Stokwiszewski and Jerzy Jarniewicz. After a delightful article by Stokwiszewski, who wrote that slam poetry is a response to the piece of the early 21st century, a successful link between everyday life and creativity, and poetry open to the needs of listener, this provising text by Jerzy Jarniewicz appeared. Referring to American tournaments, the scholar clearly pointed to the aggressive competition during the events and described slam art as an efflorescence of the culture of impatience. According to him, spoken texts by slammers do not deserve to be called poetry. Slam poetry to this day has a countercultural character, and one of its means of expression is this poetics of rebellion. A reflection on the role of rebellion in art, it is worth referring to a broader category, namely culture perceived as a set of practices taking the form of socially engagement actions. Zygmunt Bauman has been observing this phenomenon for years, writing about the dichotomy of discourses focused around the notion of culture, in the light of whether it is an activity of a free spirit or a tool of routinization, and a servant of social order. Within the framework of the first discourse, culture is understood as the ability to oppose the existing order, the ability to reject tradition, to cross borders, or to search for new paths. A slammer text in which the author uses the possibilities of nonverbal communication is much more attractive for the audience, and the multitude of stimuli engage their attention and enables them to experience the performance more deeply. The analysis of utterances using the possibilities of gesture or mimicry has shown that they are much more likely to receive higher scores, and the utterances are better remembered. The audience in the role of co-performers, it is also frequent strategy, such as Przemysław Kral text Be My Republic, written during a slam tournament at the Bydgoszcz on 2018. I will read this and other texts in Polish so that you can interact with the original language. I will then discuss each and indicate its theme. And its text, Be My Republic. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, na pasku mocarstw biedaków równych Tobie. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, wojną domową Twoje pięści z marmuru, Twoje drzewce z kości słoniowej. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, nieś mi monstrancje na pałkach w pierdolu ortalion haftowane w Celtyki. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, chwyć za gardło i duś benzopirenem, tlenkiem węgla, pyłem zawieszonym. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, wieżą ze szkła i stali, kawą parzoną w domach z betonu. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, kabaletem Polsatu i żartem w familiadzie. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, frankiem szwajcarskim, kryptomaszyną. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, Passatem w leasingu, niebem ołowianym. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, golfem niemieckim w narodowym tuningu. Bądź moją Rzeczpospolitą, orantem w szpagacie na oranej miedzy, który ciągle szuka pochodzenia i nie wie. Panną na wydaniu za cudzych mężów, ziemią obiecaną, z której z kolan wstaje tylko nowy dzień. The intention of the sender is not only to focus the attention of the audience, but also to amuse them with particular examples known from everyday life and pop culture, whose brightness is to make them reflected on the multifaceted image of the homeland that he builds. He refers to the houses of concrete, known from Martyna Jakubowicz's song, as well as the internet meme that Karol Strasburger, the host of Familiada TV shows, tells not particularly funny jokes. Slammer also refers to the stereotype of the favorite German car models chosen by Poles who want to appear rich. For example, it is the Passat and Golf, and to the stereotypical image of the Polish nationalist who, in addition to subscribing to the values of God, honor, homeland, is also characterized by aggression and the use of violence. Slammer presents in his text an image of a homeland of many contrasts and peculiarities which cannot be found elsewhere. The audience laughter at the moments pointing to various stereotypical elements shaping the image of Paul may prove that the slammers are particularly close to their hearts. The audience reacts to Kral's words by laughing, thus showing that the stereotypical lifestyle contained in the text does not concern them. Elements of cultural discourse that oppose the domination of established patterns are used by social movements. I define them, following Piotr Sztomka, as possible organized collective acting together in non-institutionalized manner to produce change in society. The action of a social movement make the various forms of expressing dissent and striving for change, including those that create artistic action as part of a protest. The essence of all such action is the appropriation of space, emphasizing separateness and dissatisfaction with the currently prevailing public order. Creative protest accompanies communities gathered around poetry slams. Slammers modify existing forms of expression and use them in the stage space to present socially engaged statements. Their aim is to evoke a communal understanding with the audience. Speeches inscribed in the poetics of protest fall into the categories indicated above using the following strategies of rebellion. References to media discourse can be rhetorical or refer to current events through content. These are narratives in which the slammer uses a schematic plot to express his own opinion on a social issue that is important to him. He does not talk about his own experience, but through the simple statement as an example, he has the opportunity to express his opposition. The speeches are based on description of not very popular facts from the lives of various artists or scientists, and they also include references to the lesser-known philosophical discussion or polemics that have not reached a wider audience. An example of such a speech is Klemp and Rakete by Theodor Ashder, in which the author presents a new pattern of careenings of our time. It is ship captains helping people in a refugee situation. For their action, they not only faced arrest, but also showed trials. To żaden medal, to tylko wiersz o dwóch bohaterkach naszych czasów. Nieprawidłowy, bo wiesz, Google Doc nie lubi feminatywów w polskim. Kalora Lakete i Pia Klemp. Ich miejsce to ocean, jak same mówią. Przechodzą teraz przez polityczne procesy pokazowe. Ich winą jest, że są z solidarnością międzyludzką sprzymierzone. Bohaterkami, bo nie zgadzają się na to, żeby solidarność z potrzebującymi stała się przestępstwem w Europie. Kapitanki Klemp i Rakete, gdziekolwiek będą nawigowały, ich statki trzymać się będą na falach stabilnie i śmiało i będą ratowały ludzi. Nas ludzi. Ashdal talks about the experience of the woman activist creating a point of departure for her opposition to the belittling of women's role in society and the xenophobia of this in power. Slammer plays the story of the women captains in a broad context, explaining that only mutual, often radical solidarity modeled on the attitudes of Karola Rakete and Pia Klemp can protect people from squandering their humanity. The statements that treat poetry as a metaphor for life are parabolic in character. They rebel against the understanding of literary creativity as elitist, available on paper, detached from the author or academic. Their issues are addressed by a slammer with the pseudonym Brugmansia in the text I have decided. Postanowiłam, że zostanę poetką. Czytałam codziennie teksty innych poetów, zakupiłam 10 nowych tomików wierszy, 8 papierosów wypalonych w klimatycznych półmroku przy świeczku o zapachu róży, a kartka nadal śni bielą, jak wyprana w perwolu. Gdy w końcu piszę na niej 2 słowa, od razu je skreślam, z kartki składam samolocik i niech leci na podwórko sąsiada, który ciągle rzuca mi pety na mój balkon. The author draws attention to the stereotypical vision of an inspired artist who not only seeks his masters among other artists, but also needs an atmospheric climate to evade inspiration. Such a romantic vision becomes an object of rebellion for the slammer who, having failed, gives up writing, which she expresses with a vulgarism that contrasts with the whole statement placed in the last verse. Later in the text, Brugmansia searches for the possibility of creating an artistic expression and comes to the conclusion that it was only when she decided to give up being a poet that she noticed that what can be defined as poetry does not fit into any volumes, nor can it be taught, since it's individual experience and emotion that can activate in a person the need to create. The author writes, poetry can only be or not to be. And one is a poet from birth to death, from their hair under your arms to your appendix. You are a poet deep in your genome, in every cell of your body. Brugmansia's manifesto is connected with the role of slammers in the art community and with the fact that they are perceived as competitive, eager to gain popularity, lacking literary talent, and coming to slam tournaments purely for entertainment purposes. What is overlooked is the slammers' social commitment, need to express their views and believe in the power of the spoken word. This belittling of their role causes numerous protests and a sense of misunderstanding. Thematic references to media discourse are most often topical, are created under the influence of emotion and become the slammer's subjective commentary on reality. Statements within this strategy usually express disagreement and rebellion against the introduced changes, controversial events, but also silence on issues important to the artist. In Slammer's statement from the last 5 years, there have been references to teacher strike, the women's strike, the action of public services during the COVID-19 epidemic, texts criticizing nationalist attitudes or opposing hate speech. For example, far after the murder of the Gdańsk mayor Paweł Adamowicz. In 2020, there were statements commenting on the situation of the presidential election in Poland. Wania in the speech Polska i ja described his difficult events, schizophrenic relation with his homeland, which was personified and present as a toxic lover. Written after the June election, the text refers to Andrzej Duda's participation in the Hot 16 Challenge action in support of medics, and the quotation from the text of the President of the Republic of Poland is in Wania piece a harbinger of the coming bad times for the country, which is emphasized by the vocabulary semantically expressing fear. Wieczór wyborczy, a po nim 3 lata ciemności. 3 lata ciemności, 3 lata burzy, 3 lata ostrego cienia mgły. Dziś pierwszy raz od dawna zamknąłem okno, powiała chłodem. The author writes that his homeland is on the verge of madness with a margin of error. Using a play on words, he expressed his anxiety about the fate of Poland. An attitude of disconnect with the prevailing social situation, widely commented on in the media, appears in the speeches of Slammer with the pseudonym Jan Weź się utop and Adela Kiszka. The authors, independently of each other, titled their speech with the numerical notation 2020. In 2020 by Jan Weź się utop, there appears a reflection on the events of 11 November 2020, which took place in Warsaw. Slammer writing about the omnipresent ash, dust, and sand refers metaphorically to the uncertainty he feels about the action of the real Polish nationalists, with the term having an ironic ting. Popiół wypełnia miasto, Warszawę, trzeszczy piasek w szkle, rzeka porywa brzeg, psy przy stadionie pilnują w porządku prawdziwych Polaków. Wybiło źródło w szary beton. The Slammer expressed his critical attitude towards the November demonstration by writing about the demonstrators in the rhyming phrase, an unmerciful swarm, a prophetic dung heap. The ending of the text, however, expressed his faith in the coming of different times when he will be able to cross Moldova streets safely. The author believes in the power of verbal defiance, writing that it is words used to express rebellion that will lift the ash, cleanse the city. Words ash carries, Warsaw, I will cross Moldova, July, in the street. 2020 by Adela Kiszka has a personal dimension concerning the change in her life that occurred in the eponymous year. One of these was the participation that media chaos and the number of so-called fake news stories in 2020 increased due to the marasm resulting from pandemic isolation. Slammer objects the people denying the dangers of a pandemic, which she describes as clowns. The author writes, 2020 is about fearing for grandmothers and cursing at clowns on the internet, talking about turning on thinking and thinking of the muzzle. It's more listening and less talking. It's making a ranking of curiosities. The media coverage also generates a lot of anxiety for the creator, who is aware of the threat that the new coronavirus has become. Slammer audiences can accept or reject such text and even interrupt or prevent a slammer from performing when he talks about something the majority disagrees with. Reference to religious discourse appear in statements whose authors rebel against Christian values, exposing in their speech their doubt in the existence of God or perceiving moral decadence and hypocrisy of the believers. A form of protest may be transforming religious genres of prior origin and placing them in a new context, as is in the text by Patricia Sikola entitled Litany to the Homeland, Motherland, or Civic Realization of the Sodexo Voucher for Polishness. The statement is a polemic against Polish values centered around patriotism and Catholicism. Using the form of a litany, the author expressed her opposition to the Polish mentality, and the queen in her speech is not the mother of God, but the homeland. She does not possess any feature that, according to the author, would be acceptable and worthy of respect. Sikora defines Poland as follows. Kraina VAT-owska, kraina luksusowa i wyborowa, kraino tribali, złotych zębów i rowów mariańskich pod lędźwiami, kraino w pierdolu pro publico bono, kraino czemu nie odpisałeś na Messengerze, jak byłeś aktywny, królowo promocji, królowo betonowych lasów, królowo hałasów, o nic jeszcze więcej, królowo multikina i multikulti na niby, królowo mszy. Poland in Patrycja Sikora's work has many faces, and only a true knowledge of the cultural context reveals the critical dimension of the speech. In the religiously styled text, there are references to excessive alcohol consumption by Poles, a tendency to acts of verbal and physical violence, quarrelsomeness, stinginess, poor style of dress, or disorderly architectural space of Polish cities. All these stereotypical features of Poles and Poland are accompanied by their hypocritical religiousness, which is often demonstrative. Sikora presents the opinion that Poles are not guided by Christian values in everyday life. They only willingly attend Mass. This is a routine activity that does not bring reflection on improving one's own spirituality condition. The rebellion against God and Christian values is sometimes contrasted with social reality in Slamer's works. Behind the facade of searching of lack of fight, a sense of fear appears, which is pierced by religious patterns internalized in childhood. Sattuna writes about the religious massacre as a heavy-weight problem in the text entitled Scars. Człowiek martwy nie straszy z powodu śmierci. Straszy brak, czego nie widać, nie słychać, nie czuć. Jako dziecko boisz się martwego gościa na krzyżu. Dopiero po nastu latach łapiesz, czym jest metafora. Dopiero po nastu wiesz, że za kogoś to jedynie kobieta mogłaby umrzeć przy porodzie i to ona wisi na przysłowiowym krzyżu. Dopiero wtedy rozumiesz, że umieranie za kogoś nie jest romantyczne, ale po prostu chujowe. The above speech is an objection to the gruesome images that are shown to children as part of their familiarization with the passion narrative. The statement also refers to the activities of women gathered around the Black protest and is a rebellion against anti-choice movement in Poland. In a way, it became a harbinger of the events at the end of 2020 and the Constitutional Tribunal judgment introducing a total ban on abortion in Poland. Using elements of colloquial language or expressive sentence with vulgarism, the author expressed his opposition to the domination of Catholicism and the mechanism used by church heads and politicians. Sattuna also rebels against the blameless or even forced suffering, which instilled in people from childhood impairs their functioning in adulthood, introducing a complex related to the feeling of inability to meet the expectation of others. The Slamer's speeches deal with topics that relate to current events, which makes their speeches columnistic in nature. Xenophobic attitudes, silence on the situation of refugee, depression, the rights of non-heteronormative people, criticism of consumerism, spirituality, lack of self-acceptance, disillusionment with everyday life, disagreement with the wrongdoings of politicians and other actors of the public scene are a number of flashpoints that dominate socially engaged Slamer speeches and are the basis from their rebellion. Their common feature is the use of means emphasizing emotions. On the lexical level, these are vulgarism and colloquial expression. The expressiveness of Slamer speeches in the syntactic layer is evident in the use of single sentences, broken sentences, elliptical, the use of numerous repetition with emphasis, the tempo of a maximum 3-minute performance. In order to maintain contact with the audience, performers use rhetorical questions and phrases or even entire narratives in the second person singular, which allows the audience to relate to the slammer's speech, recalling their own experience. Slam artists use simple and universally recognizable stylistic devices and well-known quotation from various cultural texts to maintain a level of communication with the audience. Rebelling against the values fixed in custom and society, they prove that a different vision of the world is possible and that protest using the power of the word can change the attitudes of those who want to listen to it and decide to participate. What will happen to Polish slam? There are indications that regardless of various financial and organizational problems, it will continue to develop and attract new, interesting artists who have a lot to say. Slam is slowly entering schools, as exemplified by the activities of Smutny Czujnik. Sattuna is teacher by day and effectively shows slam to his students. He is not the only one who organized workshops for slammers. We should also mention the slammer Wiosna from Warsaw, Tomasz Gromadka from Warsaw, Józek, Bydgoszcz, Rutka Zydel, Kraków, or the organization Sztukowirówka, Trójmiasto. In 2021, Michał Grzebieniak created a podcast called Atomowy Slam, Atomic Slam, and Monika Błaszczak made audition about slam in Capital Radio. A few days ago, the results of the competition for scientists of the National Science Center were announced. As part of the competition, funding was awarded to a project to build a virtual poetry slam archive, which will be a platform for collecting slam utterances from Poland and around the world. The grant was won by me, and the construction of the website will start already in 2022. Right now, I'd like to invite you all to follow our activities on the website Fundacja Kulturakcja, and in a few months also to send in your recordings. Let the Polish archive have a chance to become an international project. If you have any question for me, be sure to find me on Facebook. That's where I will be the quickest to reply. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be back and to see you again. Welcome for those who just joined the live stream. Welcome to the academic part of the European Slam Poetry Championship 2021. So, my name actually still remained the same. I'm still Esohe Weyden, and I will also be the moderator of this panel discussion on this is terrible. So I've been saying this word like a million times backstage, and just because it's live, all of a sudden I can't pronounce it anymore. Terrible. LGBTQIA+. Bam! Going in with a bang. That's how we do it. Well, one of the key themes of the World Poetry Slams organization was LGBTQIA+, and we already discussed decolonization in the other parts, so I think it's time to go a little bit deeper into this topic. So, just like I said a bit before, it's very important to introduce the panel at first so you all know who these talented and interesting people will be, who will be sharing their insights with us. So let's start here on my right. Pieter, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Pieter Delfosse, and I'm a writer, I'm a playwright, and I live and work in Brussels mainly, and I work with a lot of groups as well, with children, students, and I try to find a connection between my own work and the work that I do with the groups.
No, that's very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next one.
That's fine. So I'm Inke, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a spoken word artist, a journalist, and an educator. And in all of my work, I focus, like the main themes are gender, sexuality, LGBTQ+ themes, but also like mental health and like, I know like when in my journalism I hear interesting stories from people, I also try to incorporate those in my spoken word, so it's interesting to like make that bridge. But those are the main things I focus on, and I just try to fight for like justice and liberation in everything that I do, basically. Yeah.
Nice, thank you.
I don't know if it's, I'm Darah. I'm an artist, pluridisciplinary artist, spoken word artist, writer, actress. My pronouns are they, them too. I'm a vegan. and I teach also theater, sing, and corporal expression. And
I'm Uschi. I live and work in Brussels. I'm a fiction writer, and I also have an academic background in experimental psychology, and I work as a policy advisor at the Department of Youth, Culture and Media for the Flemish government. And recently, the beginning of this year, I started a writers collective, Historics, and it's actually a collective for everybody who writes, so it's very, very broad. So it has academics in it, journalists, writers of poetry, but also comedians and just everybody who uses words as a way of expressing themselves. And it's a Belgian collective, so it's multilingual, and actually Marie is also a member of Historics. And the first French poem we had on our platform was Marie's poem Afrodescendante, which she also performed for this competition. So yeah, that's what I've been doing lately.
Nice, that's a lot actually, so cool. Canuto, can you hear us? Yeah?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm so happy for having me. Thanks a lot. Well, this is Canuto Roldan. I'm an artist, also a spoken word artist and organizer from the Mexican circuit Poetry Slam, and also from Abya Poetry Slam. Abya, as maybe you know, is as we name this continent in a decolonized way. And I'm so happy because we were working a lot on making these spaces for radical listening, which I will tell you more in a moment. But it's about managing safer spaces in this area of the world, because for LGBTQIA plus people here, it's really difficult, as in every part of the world, but it's really difficult to raise your voice and be embraced for the people and for the community. So thanks a lot. I'm also an organizer of youth and children book fair here in Mexico City and in the country. So I'm so excited for hearing what you have for your experiences.
Thank you. We're also very excited that you're here with us from all the way from Mexico. Thank God we have these technologies nowadays, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible. So I'm very happy. Well, we are here, in the academic part of the European Championship Slam Poetry. So that means that obviously today we're going to make a few links with the academic field. We're going to make a link with slam poetry, but obviously we don't need to keep it to slam poetry. Slam poetry is a part of something much bigger. It's writing, it's performing, so you can also link it to literature in general, or performing arts in general. So please feel free to answer as you wish to the questions that I have prepared, and I'm very enthusiastic to share them with you guys. Well, the first question, when people think of slam poetry as a genre, we always think of a very progressive and a very diverse genre in itself. Do you agree with that in terms of the representation of LGBTQIA+? Who wants to start? Okay.
I agree because I'm new in this world, the slam spoken world. I was not knowing this world before 4 years ago. I think it's opening, but I think sometimes it's not open at all again. It's depend of the soirée, the organization and everything. But sometimes even in competition, I already heard some really bad thing not about LGBTQIA plus people, but about women. There is I think 5 years ago it was a male field, and so it's opening, but there is work to do again and again.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It really depends on which space you're in and who's organizing it, because I've had both positive and negative experiences with poetry slam context, and it really is it's obvious when queer people are organizing it, it feels way more safe because they're more aware of certain things that they have to take into account. So it really depends on in which space you go to. I know competitions are spaces that I don't really go there because they mispronounce, they use the wrong pronouns again and again, and so it really depends who's organizing it, and that feeling of a safer space that's really essential if you want to have a diverse lineup on your stage.
Yeah, for me, I will talk about it a bit more broad, not only slam poetry, but just literature in general, poetry in general. The reason I actually founded Hystrix was that I saw all around me very strong people, very strong artists, people with something to say, activists, who didn't get enough of a platform. And that's how it all got started. So actually, our collective is for everybody who doesn't identify with the male gender for 100%. So it's actually very broad, but still it excludes some people. It also excludes some people of the community that we are talking about. So it's more about gender and not sexuality. But I did feel it was necessary, we did feel it was necessary, because actually when I had the idea, after a day we were already 12 people, So I think it's a matter of creating a safe space, but it's also, you still feel it's harder for people with a certain gender identity or a certain sexual identity to be taken seriously as artists and to be taken seriously as makers and producers of meaning. So you really see that still that white male perspective is still seen as the default way of viewing the world. And that's, for me, slam poetry, looking at it from actually the outside a bit. I mean, I'm not a slam poet, but we do have some slam poets in our collective, but I feel that it's such a beautiful, inclusive world, but it's still a world in itself, and that is because could be a safe space on some evenings. So I think it's necessary to bring that more to the central stage of life, you know, and include more different makers and different voices in that mainstream. And that's actually why we got together and started talking about this, and why I really wanted to create that platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was loud. Yeah, I think in literature or in theater, there's a very long tradition, and it's a very, I think when we look at the academical world or the writing educations, they're still founded in a really classic tradition and what is sometimes quite conservative. And I meet a lot of people who really struggle in finding their voice as a writer, as a performer, because in those writing educations, for example, they teach mostly some kind of recipes, like this is a good text, this is what good writing is, and that doesn't apply on a lot of people, and they struggle in how can I tell my stories, and how can I present myself in my own voice, and voice it's about content, but it's also about form. And I feel really the need to create those spaces and safe spaces where people can find their own voice, a part of the really strong traditions and the really classical view on what a good text is, what good writing is, what good writers are, like what is represented a lot in sort of mainstream writing circuits. So yeah, I agree that there is a lot of necessity for those spaces still, especially if it comes down to helping people or inspiring each other to find your own voice, because it's still it's an ongoing process as well. I'm writing for some years, but I don't have the feeling I have arrived somewhere, and I'm still discovering what my queer voice is, and so the need is
high.
It's
high. Thank you, Canuto.
Yeah, I think it's really needed. It's really necessary to build these kind of spaces. Such in poetry slam happens. And of course, as you know, it's very difficult. It's not kind of difficult, it's very difficult, because I think like heteronorma is not just, it's like on the air, you know? It's like everywhere, the heteronorma. So all we fight, as Pieter say, to find our own voice, and also to find together our community voice, which is what happens on a poetry slam. So let me tell you just a little bit. For example, just happened on our third national poetry slam cup, which happens just the weekend ago. We were talking a lot about how to make possible safer spaces when you are offering open spaces to the public, and you choose from the public randomly your jury. So it's really difficult, because you really do not know if your jury is really committed with heteronorma, you know, or committed to open their minds. And sometimes it doesn't happen. And in those times, of course, the slammers, we feel vulnerable. on the stage because we don't feel well received from public, and at the same time we know that this game is like that. We are offering, and we are more vulnerable sometimes when you are offering your voice, which is also your body, which is also your community and your life story, right? So in that way, it's really, really difficult because we cannot, and I think maybe is one point we agree, we don't want a public, an audience who is convinced and agreed 100% with our voices. No, we do not want a chorus saying yes, yes, no. We also want the difference, and how to manage the difference is one of the points we are discussing actually right now in Mexico, in poetry slam scene, how to manage these differences, because we want that diversity on the stage, before the stage and after the stage.
I like it how you actually really talk about those different layers, and not only on stage but also behind the scenes and organizing and etc. Uschi, I think you want to say something.
Yes, I think it's so interesting what you're saying, and I think it's a very good point, because the safe space is something that happens on stage and off stage, and the off stage part is actually what I'm trying to do with the collective, because it's a space where we can be ourselves and be who we are with our, very unique experiences of sometimes discrimination or of sometimes unpleasant things happening. And that's a space where we can say those things, like, yes, I've been discriminated. And everybody would be like, yes, we believe you, while on the outside, or some people who are not really believing those things, because they come from a different background, because they don't have that experience. So I think creating that safe space off the stage, so that when you're on the stage and there is an audience that is not following what you're saying, is not following or not believing even your experience, that you have a backup, you have your community, you have the safe space to go back to and to fall back on. So I think, that's really key.
Someone else who would like to add something? No? Because you were actually already talking about those safe spaces and how they are really needed, sadly enough, nowadays. And I know that you already talked about Hysterics, but Inke and Pieter, you also have very beautiful initiatives who are trying to create safe spaces for people and different voices and etc. So maybe you can also add this to the conversation.
Yeah. So this year we started with a queer writing group. So it's a sort of nomadis, what is it in English? Like sort of, we don't have a fixed place, or so we try to create a community where, like a safe space, to sort of experiment with your own voice, and you can experiment with queer teams, but also with finding your own voice. And my own experience is I had a very classical education, and I feel like in my writing I'm very much conditioned still in the way I write, and sometimes I'm surprised in how much I would try to relate to what the idea is of a good text, of what good writing is. And for me, so there's always a process in when I start a new text in trying to forget everything I know, and sort of breaking up my own writing. And in those queer writings group, we try to do the same. We try to work with experiments, and where we sort of take away our own writing tools, and so we try to write from something much closer, like something deeper within and something more honest. And so it's a place where we try to inspire each other, challenge each other as well, because I think that's also important to try to become our best selves or something, or our best voices. So it's a very new initiative, and Corona is still is quite making it difficult for us. But it's so I think we have to talk as well, because I'm very interested in what you're doing in Brussels as well. So yeah, it's still a sort of little community that we try to build.
Yes, for me, I'm part of Koevoet, which is like we call it an artivist safer space in Ghent. And it's also, to me, important that we add the art to safe space, like safer space, because our society is constantly developing. And if you say, like, safe space, you basically say, like, okay, this space is safe and we don't have to take any more steps. But if you say safer space, it kind of shows this thing that it has to be constantly developing, and you constantly have to take steps to keep it safe for everyone. And so that's why we call it a safer space. And in general, we focus on artivists, like people who are artists and who combine their art with activism. But basically, anyone who like is okay with our values and norms is welcome at our space. Like, it basically means like no queerphobia, no racism, no xenophobia, no fatphobia, no form of discrimination is allowed in our space. And we find it very important, like we're for artists who just rent the space and like share with everyone who can use it, because there's a lack of spaces in our society where there's no like obligation to buy something, to consume something. And like we just want to share our space. There's free tea, water, everything. And it's really like essential to make spaces accessible where people can be themselves, where they don't have to spend any money, so like it's accessible to more people. And yeah, that's what we're trying to do, like create a space where people can be themselves, can create, can educate themselves, and that's really important, I think.
Yeah, very interesting. Canuto, can you add something as well? Because you're also you are also one of the people who are creating a safer space. I like that one, what you said in Mexico. Can you give them some more information?
We from activism and poetry slam are talking a lot about radical listening in the meaning of we all need to listen from the roots. And many times that is it results uncomfortable for ourselves, because it confronts our conceptions of another kind of lives, another stories, another communities. So we need to assume that in many times we will feel uncomfortable. We need to embrace it and not to push to convince anyone or anybody. Just to listen the other people is a very valuing, is a taking the worthful part of the audience who is bringing their listening to different points of view to the stage. So we need these kind of rituals of sessions before the stage and after the stage, to ask people, the artists, how you feel, and how you feel after the jury score you, because is making available that what you have to say to the world, it doesn't depend on the score. It's not just a game. It's something that you bring to your community to making it better. So we are talking a lot about this radical listening, and the other thing is we are talking about the radical tenderness, because how you deal with uncomfortability. Yeah, you know. So it's like we need to take it with all the taking care a lot. Like, okay, what you are saying is kind of transgression for some kind of points, and you are being reactive in that moment, and you are as an artist sometimes explosive, and then we need to see each other from face to face and say and identify what kind of emotions and feelings you are putting on your work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I want to add something that I have the impression that the safe space that we talk since now, it's always linked to the fact that we think that legitimate writing like you say, classical and everything, is not how writing, because I think so the safe space is just people who don't say you are not legitimate because of your gender, of your sexuality, of your, because it's like in our mind that the good writing is white male point of view. And so our writing is not legitimate, and we don't feel legitimate about that. And so I feel that all this safe space that we're talking about is just a safe space where people don't tell us what you're writing is not legitimate because you are not like me, And yeah, I think it's really the link with everybody here is like we need this safe space because of that, because of the patriarchy and and the point of view patriarchy who legitimate something and not the other things.
Someone would like to add something to this? Yeah. Uschi? Okay.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think I really liked what you said about everything's free when you come here, and actually that's what I find in a lot of movements, a lot of organizations, little initiatives that we're actually all fighting the same battle. We are trying to shake something up, like we're moving away from a capitalistic way that society is organized, the hierarchical way, that this is good, this is bad. So, I mean, I think it's one big struggle, and we're all moving towards that in our own way, and you choose your own battles, you choose your own, themes and stuff like that. But I wanted to ask the people who are more into slam poetry, the way I understand it, it's almost always a contest. It's almost always, like a public evaluating. So, or not always, but sometimes it is. But I mean, how is that contest thing working with the things we are talking about? Like authority and stuff like that. How do you?
That's a very good question. Yeah.
Well, I don't compete a lot, especially because I don't really like the concept of definitely when the judges are like the status quo, let's say, and they're judging my queer text. It's very hard because sometimes they don't even understand what I'm saying, or they can't put themselves in my shoes, and it's scarier. It's more scary to put yourself on a stage when you're judged by the status quo, let's say. So I don't know, I prefer just open mics or just spaces where there's no pressure whatsoever. But I do like it when not only judges decide who wins, but the whole crowd. That's how it started. That's the roots. The whole crowd decides who wins. I think that's more fair, and it takes the pressure off a bit. But when there's a competition, organizers have to make sure that the judges represent reality and not the status quo. That's really important to also make these competitions more of a safer space, because I often feel unsafe at competitions, and that's just the reality, and that's why I also don't compete a lot, because
Yeah, for me the only point of do competition and all this fear that come in, it's just because sometimes it bring back people that not generally come to open mic or open stage and everything. And I think that Markalismis, when the competition rules and everything, want to mainstream spoken word, and it's the only point to the competition is that your voice can, reach out the surface of the world, and maybe, people can identify and say, oh, what is this? Or what is spoken word? What is slam and everything? And I going to see that, But for me, it's really the only thing about competition, because it's terrorized me a lot. And yeah, it's really a risk, another level of risk for me when I do my slam, because I speak about me. And you know, when I do theater, I have a costume, I have the word of other people, but when I do slam, it's really my life that I, you know, give to the public, and it's really, really, you know, terrorized. Yeah, but I think I do it because if someone in the world, because of the competition and, you know, the noises and everything, can hear what I say and say, oh my God, I'm not alone. So yeah, it's the only point of competition. Winning is not, you know.
Yeah. Inke, someone to add something. Look like you wanted to say something, otherwise I'll go to the next question.
No, I'm just like agreeing.
Agreeing, okay.
Very enthusiastically, yeah.
That's nice, that's nice. Well, we were just talking about these safer spaces, which are great that they are there and that people have these places where they can go to and just be themselves and don't feel any pressure that shouldn't be there or bad feelings, etc. But somehow, and I think you all share the same, I do hope that like the whole literature field, the poetry scene one day can be a safe space for all, and that we don't need to create these safer spaces anymore. I'm going to start with Canuto, and the rest can answer. Where does this responsibility lie to make a safer space out of the whole slam poetry field, the whole genre, everywhere where you would go? Do you think it lies with individuals, or does it lie with the organizations and the institutions who form the poetry field?
Okay, that huge responsibility lies on everybody involved on the moment, right? Actually, I think is a kind of self-advocated thing, because if you participate as a slammer, if you are an organizer, if you are an institution, you should know that you need protocols, and you need different ways to activate and to make sure that all people in feels in and is having a good attention, right? Sometimes different situations could happen, and we need to cooperate, and that's a really important moment, because it's like a teachable moment, a really meaningful moment from we all learn a lot, not only about the art of a slammer, but all the atmosphere, all the situations are happening around the scene, the moment are really, really meaningful, because it teaches you a lot of how to being part of a community, how to keep going through this path together, right? Like this moment, I think we couldn't be talking together in this moment right now if we couldn't took the moment during this pandemic world to talk about how to connect each other, what are our situations in a different country. So it is a responsibility of every single person part of this.
Yeah, Uschi, and then I'll go to Inke.
I do agree that everybody has a responsibility, but with great power comes great responsibility, and I really do think, and maybe that's not fair or it's not comfortable, but I do think that people in power and people with more power have more responsibility to be an activist, to be, you know, that person, that ally for other people who have less power to distribute that power, and that actually means giving something away. And that's sometimes a point that I try to make, and not everybody agrees with that, but I do actually agree with it. If you want to distribute power, some people are going to have to give power away, and power in this day and age is also visibility, time that you are on screen, speaking time. So it's more than just money or or functions that you have. It's also when you're a writer, for example, and you're a white, heteronormative male writer in your 60s, it is scary, you know? You are gonna have to maybe give some of your readers away to another writer. So, I mean, and it's important that we do think about that. It's not all sunshine, and, you know, some people do have to step down a bit, and it is scary and it is hard for some people. So, you know.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think, well, first of all, I think that anyone who organizes a poetry or poetry slam event, if they don't have the tools or knowledge to organize a safer space event, don't organize it. Like, first educate yourself, talk to people. Like, I think it's like bigger organizations really should build more bridges with grassroots initiatives like, I don't know, Mama's Open Mic in Antwerp or like Speakeasy in Brussels. Like, I always feel so safe and at home when I'm there. And if like these bridges are built and if people are actually paid for their mental labor, explaining what safer spaces are and how they can provide them, I think that's something that big organizations have to like take initiative to do so. And yeah, build these bridges, because sometimes there seems such a big like distance in between like bigger literature organizations and like grassroots initiatives. And so I think those bridges are really important. And yeah, in that way we can all build like more safer spaces, but definitely with all the responsibility they have, I mean, the bigger organizations have more responsibility, in my opinion, and I completely agree with what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think organizations need to understand that freedom of speech is different of safe space, because I heard that a lot, like we can say no more, yeah? No, we can do a safe space and you know, have freedom of speech, you know, it's just not speech who are haters, who I don't know how do you say in English, but you know, who are not incitation of violence, of sexism, of homophobia and everything. And I think it's not complicated. It just, you know, separate thing, you know. Freedom of speech, it's okay. Incitation of violence, hate and everything is a different thing, is not freedom of speech. Because a lot of organizations, you know, switch between the two, and I don't understand what is the problem with that. And I think it's because they are not conscious and understand everything, you know. And yeah, don't do an open stage who want to be inclusive if you don't know the rules of inclusivity, if you are not aware of that, you know. Because really sometimes, yeah, there is no bridge between the two, freedom of speech and discourse. That is not good. Yeah.
Can I shortly? Yeah, I completely agree. And like what also happens is that like people get tokenized, and like, you know, for example, people ask me to be on a stage or in a judge or something, and then they're like, oh, non-binary diversity check, you know, and they just like tokenize you and use that part of your identity, show like, oh, we are diverse and inclusive. But when you get there, like you notice that they haven't done the work to make sure that it's a safer space, and you're just there in an unsafe space for their like popularity, like, you know. So it really is important that people educate themselves and create these safer spaces first, and like don't tokenize people to tick some boxes, because that's not how we're gonna like win the fight.
Yeah, I'm looking at Canuto first, because like it might be difficult to like make eye contact with us if you want to say something. Canuto, do you want to add something, or not necessarily?
No, just well, yes, one thing. When Inke said the organization when you have more power, you get more responsibility. I also thought that when the fear of one person on power is pushing it, it becomes phobia, and it's something that we all need to keep an eye. Like, of course, everybody has a fear, right? to do something different. And when you are part of an organization and you don't know how to deal because you are not self-educated enough and in that experience, you will be experience fear. But in that moment, you need to be really clear and really conscious that you are in power and that your fears could be becoming phobia, and it couldn't be happening not when you are in power with public politics or private resources, right? So I just added that thing.
Well, I'm going to, thank you by the way, I'm going to make the bridge now to the academic field because it's the academic part that we are discussing also now today. So universities and colleges. If you look at universities and colleges, the academic world from your point of view, your country, what do you think about the representation of LGBTQI+ there? Are those places very open and safe for staff and students? Maybe I'll start with Pieter. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult question because there is more awareness also in these bigger institutions, but we see that it's a very slow process, but people are starting to think about it, so that's good. But yeah, it's going very slowly. But I think it's more than I think that those representations. It's very, very important. But it's also, I think, about a sort of attitude. When I talk about writing education, I think it's very important to make a bridge to the last question, where I think my responsibility lies is in how I work with those people. And we talked about, are you a teacher or are you, what kind of term do you like? And for me, a teacher, if I would work with students or with children in the mind of being a teacher, then I would try to impose all my thoughts of what writing should be or how they should write on them. But for me, it's more about the responsibility is about having some kind of attitude where you can be very open and transparent about your process in this writing, but also how can you facilitate a process of growing and development for them without telling them how they need to do it or what the rules are, or talking about recipes. And I think that's I think it's a sort of attitude that goes for a lot of other fields than writing alone itself. And I see that it's still a very difficult thing, or that it's because it asks a very vulnerable attitude. It's very difficult to control. So, but I think it's very worth doing more research about that and trying to think about, okay, what is a very valuable way of working with those people and trying to give them a voice, or trying to help them developing a voice without imposing yours. Is that an answer to your question?
That's a very good answer. Thank you. Thank you. Someone else would like to answer this one? If you don't want to, no problem. Then we can just go to the next one.
No, I can only say about conservatory and everything, because I don't go to uni. Sorry.
No problem.
I will give a short answer. I did a PhD back in the day, and it's just been my experience as a woman. I'm a straight woman, so I can't speak for a whole community of. But that it was a very harsh environment for people who were not male, and all the faculty members were men, and we had a lot of faculty members, and almost like 80% of the PhD students were female, and you just saw them like going one by one, you know. And I have one friend who now became a professor at the university where we did our PhD, and I'm very proud of her. But she had to go through a lot of harsh things, you know, and she had to perform a lot better than some of the male colleagues, and when you see that is still a thing, like the male-female, then you can only imagine for LGBTQI plus, how that works and all the thresholds that you come up with every day. So yeah, it's a harsh competitive environment, and it's still it's very much about authority a lot of the times. Academia, you have to trust the one who's writing a paper. Peer review, the old boys club, it's just there. And actually a lot of things in academia are just set up that they are very slow to change and very, very good for a very specific person. Are you ready?
No, not yet. No problem.
Not yet,
no problem.
not yet.
We'll just let me know when you're ready and you're feeling fine. So drink something first. That's more important now. Okay. Well, the thing is, I'm the campus poet of a university in Antwerp, and this year they set up a campaign around inclusive language and about the use of proper pronouns, which was actually a very big campaign. What is the importance of universities and colleges working around this, and how are your experiences with inclusive language in the academic field? And maybe we can also make the bridge, if you don't want to answer only about the academic fields, in literature, in the poetry scene.
First of all, I think it's essential that academics focus on inclusive, the academic world focuses on inclusive language. Because, to describe it with a metaphor, every time a person uses the wrong pronouns for me, which happens way too often, I compare it with a bruise. It hurts. It's not lethal, but it hurts. And it happens multiple times a day. So at the end of the day, you're filled with bruises. But the next day it happens again, and those bruises don't even get the time to heal. So you keep being covered in bruises. So I think, like I said, it's vital that the academic world focuses more on creating this environment where sharing your pronouns are normalized, where people are at least aware that they have pronouns, because when I start talking about pronouns, people think it's only for trans or non-binary people or genderqueer people, but everyone has pronouns and everyone can help normalize using any pronoun. And so yeah, it can start with simple things like putting it in your email autograph, sharing it when you meet someone, just normalize it, and don't expect trans, non-binary, genderqueer people to do all that work. We are not the problem, transphobia and non-inclusive language is. So yeah, we have to really come together to tackle this as a whole and not just expect it from us, trans and non-binary people, to create that change.
Mm-hmm. Canuto, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I love this topic. It's really it's a huge controversy all around the world. I don't know if you are related familiar with the Real Academia de la Lengua Española, the Spanish Royal Academy. So Spanish Royal Academy is not accepting different pronouns. They say okay, it's very difficult because you cannot change every single letter. A for female, O for male, and E for non-binary or neutral or whatever, right? So many universities and discourse speeches about that are saying this is not possible, it's not acceptable, it's not readable, it's not economic, a topic about linguistics, and it's not useful. Is the opposite way. And we say okay, it's not about but because some universities and some publishers are focusing and giving a lot of voice to these kind of speeches who says, this is not possible, please don't use it, you are corrupting our language. And we say like, oh, come on, it's like the language is from the people, right? So we say, as the earth is from the people who works the earth, the language is from the speakers, right? It's a speaker's thing, it's a community thing. And we are not asking permission for name ourselves. It's a right human, the right of identify yourself for being autonomy, for your autonomy, right? As an individual, as in a community. It doesn't matter if that community is just a family of 5 persons. Right? Because in that way, and this is the direction I want to point out, it is not about if a minority, it's about the right of that minority to being, as Inke said, seen and listened. Because in these times is the most you're seen, the most you're listened, is the most of your power you have, and the more of the possibilities to the other communities to know about you and to learn from you, right? So I think here the discussion is not about using E for neutral day in English, for example. It's about syntaxes, right? Because we do spoken word, and spoken word is about an orality. Many languages all around the world are not writing register, right? Not an alphabet, for example, talking about linguistics, but they have a syntaxis. When we do spoken word, we are making art from our orality, and orality is, it has to be with our body, with our gender, with our how we raised, you know? So yeah, academic is like saying this kind of speech is useful because it's standard, and it helps us to communicate with the most of the people, right? Yeah, that's right, and we take it because it helps us. But we need also to manage the way to listen to the other speeches who are not standard. It's about syntaxes for me, and it's a huge discussion here in Mexico with universities, with academics, with artists, and well, this thing. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Marie?
Yeah,
Are you fine?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
It's because it's a little chilly here, but I think it's because it's due to the thinking that the common thinking that the standard is neutral, but actually the standard is not neutral. It's like a choice, you know. And every time someone say to me, yeah, but it's too difficult, and it's the problem with the inclusive writing, and I say, no, actually I fix the problem of choose one way, to choosing your way, you know, to write and to speak with the common people. And the standard is not neutral, so we fixed up, you know. But I see it like that because otherwise, yeah, I understand it can seems difficult, you know. But when you say Canuto, it's okay, Canuto, yeah. When you, like you say, orality is really fun because you can really play with the language and desacralize a little bit all the languages, you know. I do a lot of my texts with both, you know, neutral gender, so I say, I don't know in English, but I say like this, that, you know, and I just had the two, or bring back new word like actress, you know, and you can play because the way that the standard that we actually knew, no, it's not neutral. So if it's a choice, you know, and just accept that people can work on something neutral, and this is not more difficult. It's to get up, to get back of your choice that is difficult.
I totally agree. it's so interesting to me. Language historically has always been used by the elite to signal that they're elite. You know, we don't make mistakes. We talk without error. We are educated. You know, so that's actually a bit what some people are feeling now. Like, oh my God, there's new language. I can't, you know, follow this because I don't understand emotionally. I can't remember cognitively. You know, like it's too difficult. People are panicking. Because language is power, you know, language is something that you use to signal who you are. And when people in power start making mistakes by using a wrong pronoun, then they're in trouble, because where is that power? You know, they just made a mistake on live television, for example, you know. So I think, you know, daring to make mistakes and daring to, you know, even though it hurts some people to make mistakes, but for me, I'd rather use a wrong pronoun and be corrected than not speak to the person because I'm scared to hurt them, you know. So I think it's a giving and taking and a learning curve. But I think it's just that, learning how to fail. Also, as an activist, I know I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes and I'm gonna step on some toes in the process. But I hope people will come to me and say, "You hurt me by saying this," or "You're speaking for me, I don't want you to do that," or whatever, you know, to talk. I think communication is so important.
Yeah. Okay, we're almost going to the end, so I would like to ask one last question to you, Marie. You recently won the Belgium Championship of Slam Poetry. I wanted to say proficiat. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Proficiat is okay. Thank you.
So, do you hope that your victory will create more awareness around multi-layered identities and the struggles that can come with them? And next question, do you believe that poetry has the power to do so?
It's my only hope that it's changed. Yeah, it's the sense of my life, really. Yeah, to change the world for the next generation. I know in this generation maybe I don't see the good that all that we create now, it's about to blow, you know, to bloom. But yeah, I'm fight for the next generation. And what the last part of the question?
If you believe that poetry has the power to change.
Yes, because with the poetry, and you know, I don't know, but poetry for me is like a field, like you can be free, you know, other. Not like novel, whose, you know, there is style and everything. Poetry is more freedom, linked to freedom for me. And so you can just take this freedom to say, hey, be aware that the freedom that I have is my reality, and my reality is next to your reality, you know. And I think with the liberty of poetry, we can do that, you know. And with slam competition or just slam, you know, is a place or voices that we don't hurt generally can have a voice, their voice, you know. So it's really important, and it's the only reason that I do that, and that I'm proud to do that, you know, to say, oh, there is another reality. And I just add something for next time. We have safe space from LGBTQI+, Afro-descendant people, but I also don't forget about validism, because I know that open stage and everything are not, you know, set for people in situation of handicap and everything, and it's also a fight, you know. I think we cannot forget about that.
No, it's really fine that you add this one, because it's true. It's when you start talking in discussions like this that all of a sudden you realize that, to start with, you can't talk about everything in an hour, and that there are so many extra factors that we sometimes tend to forget. So I hope we can do this another time and go a little bit deeper, and that we maybe can add validism in the conversation, because now you say this, it's a shame that we couldn't talk about it.
No, but just about the safe space, you know, because with organization, I think there are steps make on LGBTQI+ and everything, Afro-descendant and everything, but don't forget that there is another step to do with people in situation of handicap or invalidism. I don't know how do you say in English, but you know.
Yeah, no, that's true. Thank you.
It's important.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to all of you, Uschi, Marie, Inke, Pieter, and Canuto for sharing your insights. I'm very sure that the people at home who are live streaming this panel discussion did pick up some interesting things. Like maybe there are like some pros out there who already know a lot about this topic, but it's good to keep this topic alive. So I really hope that people at home can use this panel discussion maybe as a base to start talking about it again this evening, maybe with your family, or tomorrow, or another day with your friends. Like, keep this alive. Don't let it die down here in this room. If you organize something, maybe you can use it to reflect on your organization. Like, okay, are there things that I that I wasn't really aware about, that I learned today, that I can maybe change to make this place more safer, more inclusive for other people. So I really hope that it that it gives you guys like a small sparkle of inspiration and thoughts. So yeah, that's it. 2 panel discussions, 2 very interesting panel discussions, and that's it for today. So I hope you all have a very nice evening, and see you next time.
Thank to you, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kika and I'm going to bring a few slam poems. A slightly dystopian poem. The world is going to hell. One day there will only be toilet paper inside of toilets instead of water, shit everywhere. The sky has already gone ablaze. The wind has left the gardens that are rotting. Stenches fill the explosive air. A lone chair made out of plastic will be my home. The world is going to hell. It rains acid. Rainbows are made of the fading colors of trash, broken tones of spew like green, and dried up remainders of humans fucking. Humanity is trash. It always has been. Let the insects rule them once and for all. We are the vessels they move in. One cockroach each, and if you lose a limb in the ice-cold desert of tumbling apartments, thousands will crawl out of every single vein. The waterways and tear-filled highways. What is green is actually the poison of long-forgotten parasites, termites the size of planes that people did not want to see coming. When they do, they spew fruitful mosquito-like creatures that suck away all the muscle in the human body. The world is going to hell. The air you breathe is a fume of old tobacco and oil factories, melting in nuclear breakdowns, the kind a wailing baby who does not stop crying can cause. There are no babies anymore. There are no hugs anymore. There are no teddies anymore. Everything is melting, but the sun is frozen, kept in a plastic cup with coke and a plastic straw up the snout of a wild boar-crowned king. What does it mean to be disgusted by the annihilation of what we were once used to? The world is going to hell. Like a leopard stretching its back, breaking it into 1,000 pieces, so does our worldview. This apocalypse brings us back to our basic species needs. Excrements will no longer be frowned upon. The world is going to hell because people can't stop screwing up, and selfishness is the core of governmentality. Larvae instead of eyes, isolated tea bags collecting the fungus of discarded bodies, suicidal tendencies spelling out the word dystopia. Humanity is lost. The monkey's eyes can see death. At my grandmother's funeral, everyone received some money hidden inside a little red pocket. It had to be spent on the way home. Good luck in the form of a frappuccino, so my ancestors would not haunt me. They also gave away white envelopes with some candy to wash away the bitter taste of death on your tongue. Sweetness to cure the end of all life and all dust. Sweet teeth that decompose one day at a time until you are left with a morbid mouth that smells of the sugary death awaiting at the bottom of your stomach. We did not burn papier-mâché, no iPhones or cars given away. Despite the luxury many are now used to, our grandmother went down without material. She now lives with my grandfather in a locker far away from home, hidden from the fire of the monks and the monkeys with their grabbing paws. They aim to drag down every spirit into the fires of our ancestors. Searching for my gender. The day we had to paint our own wings, someone asked me if I purposely lingered within the field of butterfly imagery, explaining that they can't see their own beauty. My creature of clouds and soap bubbles transforms into a silly little bug, fully grown with hair, a Chinese pronoun that does not yet exist. I am Ta. The thought of that terrifies me like the pin that traps the dried out version of my gender. Scared of the marginalized, but about to realize my queer way of flying, a beacon of hope frolicking. Does this represent me? Left with wonder, shaved off my hair, I Birkenstocked my outfit and put on a shirt, screaming I am clueless about what I am looking for. Treading slowly, a thinking valley of flowers I do not know, fingers touching face, I find pollen in the slant of my eyes. The wings held me tight, air scars, I could not breathe. What are they telling me that I cannot know just yet? And why are they shut in, leaving me choking on silk and drowning in indigo? Bitten off cuticles, my eyes won't open, I sweat through nightmares of going blind, ending nowhere. Where will this lead me? The Milky Way is up. I spent my childhood following the arrows of this broken compass, always pointing west and east at the same time. I pretended I could see the northern stars, safely tucked in the tail of the bears, but no one knew I couldn't read the star signs. Never mind my kind and helpful disposition. When they call upon a Chinese volunteer, don't hesitate for a second, fingers pointing at me, east. And when I grew older, so did my callousness, my eyes sticking to every screen set on far away. I was a mermaid wishing to become a human, finding the company of the written word, the singing of those I passionately adored, the words of people I never met. And the fire roared, and I burned. I swim no longer. I know I was not born a dragon but an ox, carrying my life, dredging it over fields of mud. I used to think people would ask me and my friend if we were sisters, because we were so close, yet no one could recognize that we were two very different people. I guess chink meant the same to those who do not want to know what it means to have your classmates on the playground slide their fingers across their eyes, marking who you are supposed to be. It took me 22 years to realize I am more than half my mother, half my father. I say it again. I am not half, I am a whole. I am the daughter of two galaxies meeting, my own Milky Way. A poem on asexuality. One no one saw coming, appearing out of the shadows like a horror creature jumping on you. It will rip off your head. Kind, not angry affections, for not what people would expect. Is it really going against nature as you preach on a daily basis? Maybe it's just insecurity, mocking sexuality, flirting with others. We had it coming. There's just no place for those who refuse to conform to the daily drag. Real, but not here. Here, but not real. It's just that people refuse to listen to those who are responsible for rejecting their humanity. After all, humanity is just procreation and survival. Your instincts don't exist in my dictionary, blacklisted among many others. My humanity is spread thinly on a piece of old bread, the only food we get when locked up in your prison of asexual invisibility. Appropriate. Someone asked me if my research was appropriate, and led me back to the halting, hiccuping hesitation of fundamentals and directions I dared not take. I fear that I am an appropriator of cultures, me who is not part of culture this or culture that, who doesn't feel like they belong anywhere. She led me to questioning myself. How can I call myself Chinese, a Hong Konger, when I am blind and suspicious, a white ghost lingering in the corner? There is a matter of anonymity I could not see, and why should the queers there be the same as here? I tried decolonizing science, but ran right into the mirror of searching for my identity. Let's talk about positionality, mumbling, fuzzy hearing, shaved heads that do not suddenly make secure. I am a poet who does not know which language to write in, who does not know how to write anymore in their mother language. Grown up in an analphabetic home, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an artist, I want to climb the highest mountain on earth and see it all for myself, but my eyes won't even capture half of what can be comprehended by going into conversation. I paint words with black ink, and across them I write them again until my wrist starts to hurt. Sometimes perfection can't be found in hard work. I hold my cognition in my arms, look after it as if it were my newest, most cherished plant, leaving behind emotions, other people's emotions. I am disconnected. My binder carries me to bed, an agender pantoum. I think I might be agender. When I told my therapist, she nodded and asked me why. It's the only safe body I could ever encounter. I do not want to surrender. I am looking for at least one comfortable night before I die. My therapist nodded and asked me why. I looked back at 3rd grade and the days I started feeling gravel dirty. I am looking for at least one comfortable night before I die. Now I find solace in a binder catching my breath in a sigh so sturdy. I look back at the days I started feeling the gravel dirty rose, unraveling my childhood into my now chaotic head. Now I find my solace in a binder catching my breath in a sigh so sturdy. It carries me on clouds of dysphoria to my bed. Unraveling my childhood into my now chaotic head, I can finally succumb to resting. I turn tender. I am carried on clouds of dysphoria to my bed. I think I might be agender. Unsolicited advice to teenagers who have not yet realized their gender and who have secretly tried killing themselves, after Jeanne Verlee. When your playlists run out of music, don't stop breathing. When your high school friends start ignoring you out of nowhere, don't call them your friends anymore. When someone congratulates you on finishing your meal, don't think they are calling you fat. Do not kill yourself. When you consider shaving your hair, just do it. When you consider moving to the other side of the world, just do it. When life takes an absurdly sad take, live it true. Do not kill yourself. When your mother tells you it is okay if you're gay and that you don't have to hide anything from them, tell them you haven't figured it out yet. Do not kill yourself. When you try to figure out your sexuality, do not give yourself over to those who claim your body because they know it better. Do not release your self-esteem in the hands of pedophiles. Learn about consent. You deserve people who give you time, people who will hold your hand during the hard times. Do not kill yourself. When the blades begin to scream out again, shout at the universe, but don't lift the heft. Reach out to that one friend. When that one friend tells you it's time to let your parents know, nod and take a deep breath. Do not control alt, escape your friendship. Do not kill yourself. When you hesitate between drinking the bottles of wine or gin or vodka you don't actually like, or hugging yourself and drinking a hot chocolate, take the hot chocolate. Take the self-pitying self-care. When you think of calling this hotline services, call them and be honest. Do not kill yourself. When you do not know whether to cry or sleep, go to sleep. Give yourself time. Take a breath. Live it true. You will survive. Do not kill yourself. How to make the weight of the world hurt a little less. Some days, the weight of the world thrashes around inside of me and stays hidden in the smallest crooks of corridors cloaked in dust. On one side of the world, it is raining people who are clamping themselves onto airplanes. In another corner, the fuel-drenched woods burn their inhabitants alive, making me think of the monks who would burn holes in their arms in order to find enlightenment. Can we really find the holiness of humanity on this dried up plain where people condemn so many families to a whole solar eclipse of misery? The moon tickles the ebb and flow of water that will make even the most bedridden rise. Horses will race us towards the end of the sunrise. How can we make the weight of this world hurt just a little less? Carrying the weight of the world in my tiny bed, tangled up with blankets, ant-like construction works of plants in which I reside, a home made of fiber. Love is set to spread like a petal falling on water. It drops and circles around me, around itself. The rain spreads love like a wildfire gone wrong, and hopefully, maybe, it will reach others. Thank you very much. My name is Kika.
to be balanced, and I told you to be fine. Now all your love is wasted, and who the hell was I? And I'm breaking at the bridges, and at the end of all your lies, who will love you? Who will fight? And who will fall far behind? Come on, skinny love. My, my, my.
You could be my inner thought. You could be my star. But I keep you hidden deep inside. There is no way I can talk. You're the secret I never share, even though I knew you from the start. That doesn't mean that it is easy, no, no, no. It only makes it harder for me to talk about the things I need urgently. I need to talk, but to whom? It makes me act so silently. It's taboo. I often think of breaking out, but then I face the unwritten rules that govern our hearts and minds and make us behave like expected to. And that is what is holding me back from doing what I plan to do. Oh, how can I get this out of me? How can I be free? Let me do the things I need to do. I need some help with it, but from whom? It makes me act like a complete fool. It's taboo for me to talk about the things I need urgently. I need to talk, but to whom? It makes me act so silently. It's such a huge taboo. You're the dog that has been embarked by the teaching of the bosses, the owners that act as friends, and you got candy for being a good boy. You are so polite that you ask permission for a revolution against transgression. But don't worry, baby. They'll keep you on a leash and teach you exactly how to preach. So please, show me your very, very untamed self. Show me your unruled self, because they need to know that they are not in control on the whole of what is inside us. So please, release your very, very untamed self. Oh, show us your very, very unruled self. Show us your own true self. Hi, my name is Loeke Vanhoutteghem, and I have some more poems for you. These are the patterns we live by: anagen phase, catagen phase, telogen phase. In the telogen phase or resting phase, barely any activity is taking place, barely any rest. Undisturbed, free or relaxed state, it's a sign that's used to indicate the silence of a certain duration. Long is taket. He's silent, a relaxed state, retained by a fixative in hands and strips, slips and ribbons, and they form an inescapable pattern, a tangle that's just pliant enough to force a mild embrace, to direct a mild curve, make an ending, shape line, watch me, out of the box. In the rigidity of life lies an openness and completion and interpretation, new order. You can choose between imbricate, staggered or vanishing point. The thought of a compelling horizon parallel to the dimension of this time seems quite uncomfortable. We want more than the smeared pigments on the ideal hanging on the wall of the waiting room, something between the lights, a twilight zone where one should propel on 4 legs between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. If not, under penalty of fine, 60 euros. These are the structures we live by. At an angle of 45 degrees, you seem to disappear. You float on the waves of alpha and gamma rays, and when you arrive at omega, you go back to start. You shed your skin. From now on, you play it fair. Oh, cores feel obliged to fuse. We are more than UV on the spectrum, a mass of dead colored particles. You don't know that we don't know, that we don't understand anything of it, that we at most read non-fiction to escape shrunken utopias. Alpha keratins are found in all vertebrates, that's humans and animals. Beta keratins are found only in all living reptiles and birds. The structure of the former is coiled while the latter is twisted. I guess we could conclude that everything runs crooked. At the other side, an acquaintance is listening in and lip-syncing. I guess we could conclude that everything runs crooked. We notice scratches on the lens that's being used to listen with. Lip-sync. I guess we could conclude that everything runs crooked. While the rustling is seeping through a limp, wet entity falls on the soil, we wonder whether we could conclude whether everything just runs crooked. We can distinguish 3 types of hair. 3. Lanugo, a very thin, soft, usually unpigmented, downy hair that is sometimes found on the body of a fetal or newborn. After birth, it is replaced by vellus hair. You go back to start. On the edge, the acquaintance is awaiting you while he is wondering out loud what in this picture could be the punctum of Roldan. You answer that you only read non-fiction to bypass the dystopian, to avoid the merciless confrontation between coolness and enthusiasm. For you, the only thing that matters is the connection between not and yet. Breathe in, wait, don't speak. In case the rippling horizon doesn't end there, I'll be sick. After that, the horizon didn't stop and I did become sick, or at least a bit. Our gazes are inevitably led towards the other side on the pathway that swings through the landscape. Irregularities seem to indicate a direction. Immer geradeaus und nie wieder Krieg. Bits, lumps, bumps in the road become the pimples in a bigger plan. And then we take everything that's edible with us. When we're almost back at start, we are abruptly interrupted. He is the border, a Styx that divides Demeter from her daughter. The acquaintance on the other side holds a coin in his hand. In the foreseeable future, spring is coming. That we know that is something he knows. At that return, when everything emerges and buds, at the very moment that sprouts greedily find their way towards the light, we will be there as well. and we will lip sync. These are the rules we live by. Development is that of a seedling, thirsty, growing towards the light. I was born in the meadow, grew up in the desert, and before finding wisdom cursed by the queen of the night. Sie hat Sarastro gefragt, wer hat Todesschmerzen? Completely, and oh, I thought ich habe doch Nein gesagt. Nein, no, no means no. No, no, no. Yes. Yes to practicing scales. I'm practicing scales together with my inner voice. Gave up on fairy tales. I made a vow, I made this choice to rewrite the stories from my perspective and claim a space in this hectic, electric and sometimes skeptic world we're living in and dying in, though reflective, striving for excellence. Who's taking with me the first few steps towards a spectacular speak and we're achieving a catharsis? Can't you feel it? Stop the tumultuous tragedies, cause we're coming nearer. We're so close, closer, almost the virtuous vibrato tears the stage to pieces. Who's still standing? Who's reaching the holy heights and devilish lows? I see the faces of the people in the front row and spit and speak. Oh, I'm the protagonist without a stunt double. Look at my capacities, I'm stronger than the struggle. No armed actions or martial arts. My energy is sprouting from all my body parts. I fight for wisdom, justice and freedom. I battle like a muse, still dance like a goddess. I rewrite history, invent new plots, replace old heroes by the ones we lacked growing up. Because they told us too often where the good girls go. And I don't believe their lukewarm remedies. They were serving on a poisonous platter. This scattered. Let's hope for the better. Scattered. Let's hope for the better.
Make a cast of my body, pull back out so that I can see. Let go of how you knew it. Let go of what I used to.
I'm the protagonist without a stunt double. Look at my capacities, I'm stronger than the struggle. No armed actions or martial arts. My energy is sprouting from all my body parts. I fight for justice, wisdom and freedom. I battle like a muse, still dance like a goddess. I rewrite history, invent new plots, replace old heroes by the ones we lacked growing up. Because they told us too often where the good girls go. And we don't believe their lukewarm remedies. They were serving on their poisonous platters. They're scattered. Let's hope for the better. I hope for the better.